Here in Devon, in the tranquil Tamar Valley, is a port that once bustled with industry. Overground, farmers supplied Britain's growing towns and cities with fresh produce.
Daffodils, set for London.
While underground, miners extracted copper and precious minerals.
Firing!
Now at Morwellham Quay, archaeologists Alex Langlands and Peter Ginn and historian Ruth Goodman have gone back to the early 20th century to live the lives of Edwardian farmers for a full calendar year.
Look at that one there. It's so sweet.
They've not just been farming, but getting to grips with the rural industries that once brought wealth to Devon.
Oh, wow! We got something!
Last month, the farmers successfully harvested cherries.
That one doesn't have a stalk.
And potatoes.
Got to pick up every single potato.
Then enjoyed a trip to the seaside.
We are the Pier Echo.
Now it's August, and their time on the Edwardian farm is drawing to a close. Just one big job remains: to harvest the oats, rain permitting. In their quest to forecast the weather, they must master old crafts that were disappearing from the Edwardian countryside, while looking forward to the new inventions, the new discoveries, and changes in society that began in Edwardian Britain and shaped the world we know today.
We are now in the 20th century!
Back in February, Alex and Peter sowed an oat crop. In the Edwardian era, this would have been sold as horse feed. There were more horses in Edwardian Britain than at any time in history, so it was a lucrative crop to grow. But judging exactly when to harvest them is critical. Once again, they've called on local farmer Mr. Mudge for advice.
What do you think of this oat crop?
It's a very good crop of oats.
Yeah?
It's, well, they've got a good ear on it.
Right.
A lot of grain here on it.
Peter.
Don't you knock it down, Pete. That's what it is.
Oh, no.
It's got a good ear on it, look. It's,
Yeah.
There's a lot of grain here. It's the weather, really, that is going to play havoc with it. If you get some heavy downpours and the wind and that.
So it's actually so tall that there's a danger now of the plant, the weather actually blowing it down, flattening it, and then, of course, we can't harvest it.
When the wind's back southwest, you know it's going to rain, but when it's up around the north and northeast, you know you mean for a dry spell. Like,
Right, oh, OK, so we need to look out for that change in direction.
Yeah.
Right, and then we know we're going to get some dry weather, and that's our opportunity to harvest.
An Edwardian farmer's income relied on a successful harvest. So forecasting a week without rain to first cut, then dry the oats was essential. Observing wind direction was key. A southwesterly could bring rain, whereas a northeasterly would indicate dry. So they need a weather vane. They're commissioning one made using crafts that were dying out due to mass production.
So this is the sort of highest apex of the farm, isn't it?
I think it is, and here's the man.
They've called on blacksmith Simon Summers.
I'm very well.
Good to see you.
What brings me up here, then?
We've got a special job lined up for you, Simon.
Have you? Yeah, what's that? We would like to erect a weather vane up there.
OK.
I think you're the man to make it.
The highest spot, is it?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's also the most kind of obvious place in terms of visitors coming up to the farm and people being able to see it. I think that's quite important as well.
OK. Well, two options. Maybe a shy horse ploughing or maybe a cockerel. But I think, to be honest, a cockerel would look quite good up there as people approach the farm coming down from the lower track.
Yeah.
Alex wants to base the cockerel weather vane on his prized bird, Sunny.
It's that one with the last sickle feather.
First, they must catch him.
Looking busy.
He's unaware.
Here he is. He's here. He's coming around, Peter. Got him! Oh! Now we have him. He's made his fatal mistake here. Peter, I'm locking you in.
OK.
Careful, mate. It's my showbird. Yeah,
I've got him.
brilliant. Right, time to take your vital measurements, Sonny. 1 foot and 10 inches. Foot and an inch when he's got his neck fully extended. OK, so we're going to go from here, that centre point again, out to the edge of his sickles. I'd say 1 foot and 4 inches, maybe.
OK, I've got what I need. I'll just go away and do some drawings. Full-size drawings.
Excellent.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing them.
Yeah, brilliant.
The market gardening enterprises have been a great success. They've reaped bountiful harvests of daffodils, cherries and strawberries. Before they leave, Ruth wants to ensure next year's strawberry harvest will be just as fruitful.
Market gardening takes such a lot out of the soil. You have to put something back. Otherwise, you get a smaller and smaller crop every year. So now's the time to do that. There's such a lot of pressure on your farmyard manure. You know, there's only so much of it and you've got so much to fertilise that you can't rely just on that. Likewise, many of the chemical fertilisers are expensive and not always as good for market gardening as they are for arable crops.
In these coastal areas, Edwardian market gardeners used seaweed as fertiliser.
Seaweed is full of all those sort of minerals that the earth needs to be replenished with. And here it's so easy to get. There's the sea not very far away, and the barges to bring it easily and cheaply in bulk up the river.
Peter's come to the blacksmith's forge to meet Simon, where he sketched a design for the weather vane.
Hi, Simon.
Hello.
So you've got this, this effigy of Sonny, and you've got him leaning into the wind, and then these massive tail feathers, and that's just going to help him swing and tell us which way the wind's coming from.
Yeah, and he's actually lurching forward.
Yeah.
You know, like crowing.
Okay, and this is your repousse, is it?
That's right, yeah. That's a repousse mask of the Green Man.
Repousse means beating a sheet of metal repeatedly from one side, then the other, to create intricate embossed figures. Simon's going to use this technique to make the weather vane. He's one of the few who still practice the craft.
That's all of the artwork done now.
First, he transfers the artwork to a copper sheet.
I'm just going to bellow this in. So we've got a little dip in there. And then if you...
What is this?
This is it's leather filled with silver sand.
Right.
So it's got some give in it.
Yeah. Right.
So if we bring that onto there...
Next, Simon shapes the copper to form the body of the cockerel.
There we are, we've got the body in that little dip that I formed with the mallet. If you have a look, you start to see it swelling out.
Yeah.
So now we need to come down to this area.
Right.
Beating copper gradually makes it hard and brittle. So every so often, Simon must soften it again, using a technique called annealing.
Okay, the fire's nice and hot now, so we can put it on the fire, right in the heart of the fire.
Yeah.
And we've got to keep moving it along to get it uniform heat.
Right, and this is going to make it softer, is it?
Yeah.
Heating, then quickly cooling the metal, makes it malleable again, ready for more shaping.
Yeah. Okay, I've got it.
Ruth's travelled downriver to the coast in search of seaweed. She's meeting expert forager Robin Harford.
Hi, Ruth.
I've come to gather some seaweed for my market garden.
Ah, have you?
I have indeed. What sort of stuff do I need?
Well, driftweed, which is what we got here. Obviously
Right.
brought up by the tides. It's been quite stormy recently, so fair amounts here, and any seaweed.
Any?
Yeah, any seaweed.
Absolutely
All
anything
the seaweeds,
that the sea chucks up.
Yep.
Seaweed is rich in nitrogen and potassium, essential elements for plant growth.
The farmers, we gather it, we take it up to them, spread it on the land, and then all he has to do is plough it in.
Simple as that?
Yeah.
No processing,
Nope.
no organisation, just straight off the beach,
Yeah.
straight on the land.
Yeah.
It's quite environmentally friendly too, this, isn't it? Because it's not like you're killing anything to harvest it.
No, and you're using driftweed, which is the dead, washed up seaweeds that's come in.
How many people were doing it in the Edwardian period? Was it sort of a big thing, or...?
Coastal communities were huge.
Yeah.
Well, you know, people were still on the land. They hadn't all moved into the cities and towns for work. So it was a community venture. Poor people, you know, need some money, need the work.
Ooh, there's an enormous patch over there. I'm going to go get started. I'll see you later.
Okay, goodbye.
Ruth's collected 10 sacks of seaweed. Now she must transport them back to the farm. In the Edwardian era, this would have been done by boat. Thousands of tons of seaweed were transported in this way to market gardens on the banks of the River Tamar. Now she can fertilise the harvested strawberry plants to ensure a healthy crop next year.
In this form, it also makes a really great weed seed-free mulch. And of course it's cheap. So the seaweed should fertilise the soil, reintroduce all those nutrients that the year's cropping took out of it. And keep down the weeds over the winter. It'll slowly rot down, releasing its goodness, choking the weeds out of life.
So this is annealed and ready to work again?
That's right, yeah.
In the forge, the copper cockerel is taking shape. Next, Simon beats it on the outside to form the feathers. To give him something to hammer against, he's filling the cockerel with hot pitch.
As we add the pitch to it now, it's going to slowly melt in there and then fill that dip in. And all of these bits that we've hammered out, we want to fill with pitch.
Once the pitch has cooled, the copper sheet is flipped over.
This way a little bit. That's it. And then off we go. Let it go. Yeah.
There we go. And there it goes.
Now the pitch is supporting the copper, Simon gets on with the fine repousse work.
And you see it go down.
It does move a lot, doesn't it?
That's right. And we've got the pitch behind to support us.
Yeah.
Crafts like this were often passed down from father to son and took years to master.
You want to take that one?
Okay.
And work on that area.
Yeah.
And I'm going to work over here with a similar sort of tool.
But by the early 20th century, they were living on borrowed time.
I suppose in the Edwardian period, crafts were starting to die back because you're getting mass production.
Yeah. When the war came about, the First World War, we lost so many craftsmen and youngsters that would have taken on those skills from their fathers.
I suppose it was the war that wiped out a generation of young men, wasn't it?
It had a serious effect to craftsmen in our country.
The pitch is removed so Simon can work from the inside again. By repeatedly working from one side then the other, he's able to bring the feathers of the cockerel into sharp relief.
Should we have a look at that around the outside?
Yeah.
There you go. Look, you can see it coming up there. And we've got to taper it into there. But you can see it coming out, and then we can push that down.
Wind direction is not the only way Edwardian farmers forecast weather. A barometer, measuring atmospheric pressure, is also a useful indicator. During the Edwardian age, barometers were becoming cheaper and more widely available, thanks to mass production.
Hello, Philip.
Alex has come to meet Philip Collins, to get one for the farm.
It's a fantastic selection you've got here.
All different types.
When we talk about a rise and fall in air pressure, does that literally equate to good and bad weather?
As a generalisation, yes. Normal increase in pressure over a few days will give you better weather.
Right.
If it decreases, it'll give you worsening weather. But it can be affected by wind as well, so sometimes it's a change of wind direction.
Right. And this is enabling farmers then to start to read the weather in a way in which they probably wouldn't have been able to before the invention of this machine.
No, I mean, farmers, people out in the countryside, often have an ability to tell the weather from history. Their folklore and things handed down to them. But the barometer is the first, or the main scientific way of measuring air pressure.
So would farmers then back in the Edwardian period have had one of these?
I'm fairly sure that most tenant farmers would not have been able to afford a barometer such as this.
So someone with my size farm, really, I wouldn't be able to afford one of these.
You'd be relying on a neighbour having one, and if he was cutting his fields, you'd go and cut your fields.
Right.
But I think for your case, there's another thing we could suggest.
Right.
This is an old-fashioned, very tried and tested barometer, and I think it would just suit your...
Right, so this really is bottom end of the market.
This is low end of the market.
Okay.
Right? So you find a jam jar of some sort, glass jar, and a fairly long-necked bottle, and some coloured water. You can use plain water, but coloured makes it more noticeable.
It's more visual.
That goes in there. So the air in this bottle now is sealed because it's got water around the opening.
Okay.
If atmospheric pressure rises, it'll press down on the surface of the liquid in the jar, raising the level in the neck of the bottle. This would tell the farmer that a spell of warm, dry weather was likely.
Right. So you have a very simple, crude, domestic type of barometer. That probably suit your pocket for the time being.
I think it will do. And maybe if the harvest is successful, I could invest in one of these.
And buy a nice one.
It's the second week of August, and the oats are beginning to ripen. But it's been raining all month. If this continues, it could flatten the crop, making it impossible to harvest.
Here's the final drawing then, Peter.
The weather vane's progressing well, but the copper work forms only part of it. The cockerel must be attached to a support, so it can rotate freely in the wind.
And this is what we've got to focus on now, so we need quite a bit of iron.
Yeah.
And some charcoal will be useful.
Right.
For forging the iron.
What will the charcoal do?
Yeah, it puts some carbon content into the iron.
Yeah.
And it also gets a really good heat, because we're going to have these billets of iron we've got to forge right out into this section size. So we've got more heat in the fire.
Yeah.
That'd be ideal.
Perfect.
Simon wants to make iron for the weather vane in the traditional way. To do this, he'll need large quantities of charcoal. Making charcoal was a craft that was disappearing from the Edwardian countryside.
This is where that knot is.
So Ruth and Peter have come to get help from Colin Richards and Mick Krupa, experts in rural crafts.
Those directions must have been pretty good.
Yes.
This is the site the charcoal burn then?
Yes, it's flat, easy to get the wood to it, and once we've cleared a space, taken away all this leaf mould, we can start building the clamp.
Colin's chosen a site well away from any trees. Once the ground is cleared, they can build a charcoal fire, or clamp, starting with the chimney.
Right, we're running out of rope, Peter.
I do have my belt, my
You
goat
can't
rope.
burn that. Your trousers will fall down.
It's in a good cause, Ruth. The ultimate sacrifice. Thank you very much, Peter. You will not go unrewarded. It's very good string, is this?
Next, the raw material for making charcoal, seasoned oak, is stacked tightly round the chimney.
This process of making charcoal, what are we actually doing to the wood?
Well, the wood is made up of cellulose and minerals that you see the trees around you, they suck from the earth. And those items are quite flammable, they're volatile.
Right.
So in the process of making charcoal, what we do to start with is burn those off. And then once we've burnt them off, we try and stop the burning process. That's when we starve the clamp of oxygen, leaving ourselves with pure carbon.
By driving off the cellulose and minerals, the logs will contain just carbon. This is charcoal and will burn at a much higher temperature than wood.
This is a key moment now because we're going to cover it all up and set fire to it. And then, apart from controlling the air, there's not much we can do.
Enclosing the wood in a soil and straw layer makes the flow of air into the fire easily controllable.
All we've got is 2 tons of soil, so we've got to be really careful with it. All we need is a thin layer to cover the whole of the clamp. There you go, second ingredient for your mud pie.
Oh,
there you
lovely.
Go. Not too much, just a slight dampening.
Okay.
Now it's time to light it.
There we go, that's perfect, a few embers. What we're trying to do is get the fire going and then slow it down so that it's a cold fire. And so you get a lot more chemicals in the wood actually occupying the smoke, and that's why it's important not to breathe it in.
So I suppose you need fuel, heat and oxygen to make a fire,
Yeah.
and we're reducing the oxygen,
Yeah.
which reduces the heat, which preserves some of the fuel, which will be charcoal in the end, I suppose.
Yeah.
As the fire in here heats up, it's obviously everything's starting to shrink as it dries out and the moisture's driven off. So this outside layer of mud is cracking, and where the cracks appear, smoke starts coming out, and that's a bad thing because that means air can get in. So we've just got to keep covering all these little smoke holes so that we can control our fire.
We're now getting sort of heat into the clamp, and what we're burning off there are the gases.
Colin's watching the clamp closely, looking for signs that the cellulose and minerals have burnt off. Then he blocks off the chimney to restrict the air, slowing the burn.
We're bridging over the clamp now with these timbers so that we can put a covering on which will actually choke the fire.
The fire must smoulder for 5 days and nights until the wood has completely carbonised into charcoal. The team are here for the long haul, so it's time to set up a sturdy shelter.
I think that's in now, Peter.
Cool, can you hang off a bit?
I'll see if I can hang off it. Oh.
Can I get a bunk down?
Get up! Sorry.
Get up, Bill. We're going the other way now, Peter. Right, well, it's certainly strong enough to take the canvas, I think. And now we've got our ridge pole up, just putting a canvas over, and this is going to be our shelter for the next 5 days as we watch and tend the charcoal clamp.
This is how charcoal burners would have lived, moving from site to site through the woods. And, you know, it was permanent occupation, and there are many accounts of people raising, you know, sort of about 8 kids in a shelter no bigger than this.
You don't often get a chance to build a camp at my age, so I always love getting out in the sticks, properly living under canvas.
As night falls and they settle into life on the camp, it's time for some sustenance.
Devon pot cake. It's cheap, it's filling, and is really easy to do on a fire. Flour with some fat rubbed in as if it was pastry. And then I'll be adding some eggs and milk. And then whatever fruit you can find, and cook it in a pot. This is a real cooking in the woods sort of a recipe, this is. Tinkers and gypsies and charcoal burners.
Next, trout, cooked on a shovel.
Look at that, instant sear. A piece of Devon pot cake.
Ooh, thank you very much. Delicious.
I know it's got fruit on it, it's not really pudding. Do you want fish with it? This is the clean shovel.
Not the dung shovel.
Not the dung shovel.
Wunderbar.
Trouty. There we go. Bit of fish.
Thank you.
Delicious, Ruth.
Could you ask for more?
Look, we're very close to the end of the year. How are we going to go out? We're going to go out with a bang or a whimper?
Whimper.
Look, you may cry yourself to sleep every night, Peter, but some of us want to do something to mark the end of our year. What do you think we should do?
Well, a fete or something?
Yeah, a big fete. All the latest equipment they would have had in the Edwardian period. The future.
Where are we? Yeah, the future.
Edwardian summer fetes were usually held after the harvest, when farmers had money in their pockets. Village fairs and agricultural shows weren't just about having fun. They were also a place where salesmen could show off the very latest advances in farming technology. At the forge, Simon's working day and night to get the copper cockerel finished. So far, it's taken him 120 hours.
This is the most rewarding bit for me. The finishing touches, the detail. Yeah, you can actually, it actually looks like Sonny now.
Back at the camp, Colin's preparing to make iron for the weather vane. To do this, he's building a primitive furnace.
In the Edwardian period, there was a great shortage of iron, and in this area, a number of skills survived into the modern age. You had iron ore, and if you wanted iron, you could actually make it in what is essentially a very primitive furnace.
What an ancient technology, but I mean, was this still going on in the Edwardian period?
Well, in these rural areas, skills survived for generations beyond which they were almost obsolete or extinct in the cities, because what you didn't have quite often was money. And if you had the raw materials, which they had down here, then you could always get yourself out of a fix.
Iron is found naturally in a rock called iron ore. To extract the metal from the ore, it must be heated in the furnace to 1,200 degrees Celsius. To achieve this, they must burn the charcoal.
This is the acid test. 5 days, 4 nights without sleep. And, you know, we need to know whether we got good charcoal.
Digging through the layer of straw and soil, the charcoal is revealed.
First couple of pieces. Right. This is what we've been looking for all that time.
Wow.
Oak that is burnt right through and is pure carbon. Black gold.
Black gold?
Yep.
Gently does it.
up.
Oh, whoa. And that's the iron ore going in.
Yep.
Right, that's the raw material, yeah?
That's right, yeah.
What exactly is going on in there now?
Well, we've got the iron ore, which is fusing together. But we need that last little boost to get it up to temperature, to get it up, you know, 1,000, 1,200 degrees, so that we've got a workable bloom of iron.
To make the charcoal burn even hotter, air is blown into the furnace using Edwardian bellows, a back-breaking job that falls to Peter. Simon's come to the camp to supervise the iron making. While the furnace gets up to temperature, he's got something to show them.
There's a lot of hours gone into it, and with Peter's help, this is what we've come up with.
Wow.
I'll make the tea.
Oh, my word, look at that. That is amazing, Simon, how you've got that relief there.
God, it's so thick as well. I mean, it's not like a thin sort of foil of metal. That's really chunky.
I can see the wind catching this and catching the feathers. And
yeah, the feathers are just going to be like sails of a boat.
So he crows into the wind.
He crows into the wind, which is going to help us tell which way the wind's blowing and what weather's going to come for our harvest. So,
That's right, yeah.
Excellent.
Next, I need the iron, guys, for the pivot after the copper, the arms for the letters for the north, south, east, west, and then some lovely graceful scrolls to support those arms.
Inside the furnace, the charcoal's been burning for 10 hours, raising the temperature of the iron to melting point.
You can see, you know, the heat that's needed to get it to this stage.
I can feel the heat.
Yeah.
And hear the raw.
And you see our charcoal glow.
Yes.
Now the molten iron must be extracted, using the most basic of methods.
Yeah, well, basically, one at a time, but gentle blows.
Piece of lead.
Okay.
In theory, the molten metal inside the ore should all stick together like toffee, while the waste material, known as slag, breaks away. But it soon becomes clear there's something not quite right.
So, run us through what just happened there.
It's just crumbling. There's not enough pureness in there, is there?
At the moment, we'd be hard pushed to make a type in.
Colin thinks the iron ore wasn't hot enough, so it's back in the furnace to get it even hotter.
What sort of pressure should I be putting on these tongs?
Just keep them.
Now that is just a completely different material. It's a lot spongier, isn't it?
Kind of like getting the good bits to stick together.
Right.
That's stuck
And it's working, isn't it? Look, it's
Yeah.
working. Essentially, we've taken a raw material from the hillside. Having done this burn, we've produced enough charcoal then to reduce that raw material to a workable and malleable material in itself
that's
that
right.
we'll be able to use for this weather vane.
That's right. Once we've actually got all of the waste product out of this, then we can actually forge it into any shape that we need.
Now they've worked out the method, they must produce enough for the weather vane. Back at the forge, Simon's worked the iron into rods. Now he's using the charcoal to heat it, ready to make the support for the weather vane.
And how's this charcoal doing?
It's really good. No, we're getting the heat quick in there. Obviously, we've had to break the charcoal down quite a bit because it's quite, you know, big chunks.
I mean, is charcoal good for working metal?
Yeah, very good. You don't need much air going into the fire, not so much as you do for coal or coke, but you can get the heat in very quickly with charcoal. Now we just got to get on with the scroll now. And we just start to curve it off the edge of the anvil. And I'm brushing it with a hammer.
Brushing it? It's
just gently brushing it down.
It's really thin metal.
And then, that's it, knocking it towards me. And then just gently elevate. There's the start of the scroll.
In the field, the oats are ripe and ready to be harvested. But the rain keeps coming, and if they're left too long, they'll rot. The farmers need to predict a week without rain, so they can first cut, then dry the crop. The cockerel too is turning golden, as Simon puts the finishing touches to his masterpiece.
I can see little flakes of gold moving as you touch with the brush.
I'm just going to do from his cheek.
Right, just
to his
that
beak,
area.
First, he coats the copper with glue, then gently applies the gold leaf, using static electricity.
What you have to do is be very careful with the static, because that's the most important thing, and I'm getting the static from my stubble on my face.
You're using body-made static as you're sort of lifting it, as a magnet.
Yeah.
And it's incredible, isn't it? Because, I mean, this gold leaf still is beaten by hand, isn't it?
That's right, yeah. It's actually approximately 4 millionth of an inch thick. And it's going to protect the weather vane.
I mean, this is making like a complete seal, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like a membrane of gold around the whole item, and it's going to catch the sun, look proud to be there, and, and it's not going to corrode, you know.
Finally, the weather vane is ready to take pride of place at the farm.
Perfect timekeeping.
That's every going up the lane.
You be careful.
I will.
I don't think he was ever in the Boy Scouts, you know.
If he was, he didn't pay much attention.
Yeah, little face. Are you happy with that, Pete?
No, but it'll do.
OK, I've got it.
won't be the first cock-up we've seen this year, Peter.
It won't be the last.
Do you need a hand up there?
Yes, please, Alex.
Nice soft Goodman mattress to land on if I slip. You can trust my ladders, Peter.
Just need to lift it up here a little bit higher.
Yep, OK.
Right, if you hold it there,
OK.
just slide it on.
Yep.
Wow. Give it a spin.
Spin it round, there we
There's a bit of a gust of wind.
Bit of a gust, well...
Oh,
yeah,
there it is.
Yeah.
It's showing us the way the wind's blowing.
Yeah.
Which is...
In the direction of don't harvest your oats yet.
That looks fantastic from down here.
Fantastic. Job well done, Simon.
Yeah, thank you.
Tribute to the craftsmen and women of Britain.
Yeah, definitely. Drink to that.
Yeah.
August has been a washout, the worst possible weather for harvesting oats. But now they've got all the tools they need to predict a dry spell.
Well, that's definitely going up. So we should have some good weather on the way.
Alex is looking for a rise in pressure with his homemade barometer. Peter's keeping an eye on the wind direction. And Ruth's got her own method.
This is my granny's way of telling the weather. A bit of seaweed hanging outside. If you get a high humidity, it goes all slimy.
For the past few days, the atmospheric pressure's been high and the wind's been blowing from the northeast. This should guarantee a period of dry weather. So the team have decided to harvest the oats this afternoon. Rather than relying on horsepower, the team are turning to petrol power. They'll be using a machine invented in the Edwardian age that was to revolutionise farming: the tractor. Engineer David White and farmer Harry Williams have brought along the Moghul.
How fast does it go then?
It actually goes the speed of a walking horse, which is 3 miles an hour.
Right.
Just does one single speed forward. It does have a benefit of a reverse gear for manoeuvring. These were like the earliest attempts of mechanising farming, but within 10 years, a tractor would be recognisable as you see a modern tractor.
Right.
The tractor's pulling a reaper binder, one of the most important agricultural machines of the age. Mr. Mudge used this one as a boy, and it hasn't been used for half a century. First, it cuts the oats, then ties them into sheaves. But after a promising start, it all goes a bit haywire.
Just setting this knotter, it's just causing us so many problems.
The knotter, the device that ties the oats into sheaves, has jammed.
This lot isn't tied at all. I mean, some of the others have got some string holding them in places, but this lot's just being chucked out.
We've finally worked out that it's where it comes out of the drum, it's just pinching the string, and that's just stopping it coming through, which means it just snaps. If we don't get this right, it's such a sensitive piece of kit. That's it. Might as well do it by hand. Try it now. How's that?
The harvest has attracted the attention of cinematographer Chris Davis and producer David Upshaw. The first purpose-built cinema in Britain was built in 1907. By 1914, there were over 3,000.
So there are a lot of little film camera crews out and about in Edwardian Britain.
More than you'd think. The thing that's really happening in Britain is the kind of beginnings of a documentary market. I've realised that people are fascinated with seeing real events, being able to see the King, the Queen, the Prime Minister, and also seeing themselves. People are absolutely fascinated with seeing themselves.
You've got a handle on the side of this camera. Does that mean you actually have to wind it
Absolutely.
to make it work?
It was the only means
So
of
it
turning
really
the film round, yes. And you had to
Yeah.
do it at a steady pace. And it should have been 15 frames a second. But different cameramen would do it at different speeds. And sometimes, if the projectionist did it at another different speed, it would change the look
So
of the
everybody
film
would look all
altogether,
sort of-
yes. You could make them go faster or slower because there was no electric motor until later on. It was all done by hand.
After some adjustments, the reaper binder's back in action, cutting and binding the oats into sheaves. But precious time's been lost.
The thing is, it's 4:05. It's taken us this long to get this far. We've waited for the weather, and really we've only got another 4.5 hours of sunlight if the weather doesn't, of course, turn. And there we are, the perfect sheave of oats. We think we've got there. We've done a couple of clean runs. We haven't got choked up. We're tying nicely. The sun has come out. It's going down, but it's come out. So half the battle is won.
This is the side of the boys made way back at the beginning. I hope it's all right.
I'll have a little one.
So it's an interesting colour.
Is it now?
Yeah, this is proper scrumpy, proper.
Been a time driving, it hasn't had a big one. You're an expert anyway. That's good stuff there. I love me side, eh?
I think that's a fine scrumpy, that is. How about you, Mr. Mudge?
We'll have a barrel from them now and take it on with us.
Well, we've got 300 pints.
Straight to a gathered harvest.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Hey, cheers.
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 Slightly premature, but...
That's good though, doesn't it?
The oats will be left in the field for a week to dry before being stored in the barn. With the harvest done, now they can look forward to the village fete. Alex, Ruth and Peter's time on the Edwardian farm is drawing to a close, so it's time to say goodbye to the livestock.
For me, this is the end of the poultry year. I've brought on the next generation, doubled the size of the flock, doubled egg production as well. So it's been a success, and I'm so pleased with these fellas. Brilliant.
They're also saying goodbye to the Edwardian way of life that they've experienced for the past year.
I've really felt this year so much of an empathy for people involved in the day-to-day fight for life. For all its romanticism, for all its looking back on the past, the day-to-day realities of Edwardian life in the countryside are hard, really hard.
It's the day of the summer fete. When the Edwardian age ended with the First World War in 1914, it left a legacy of innovations, such as the aeroplane, that would go on to shape the 20th century.
Come and see the latest innovations of the modern age.
Fetes would exhibit new inventions, like the latest in mechanised farming equipment. They were also a place to have fun and spend money after the hard work of the harvest. Once raucous and drunken affairs, by the Edwardian age, pressure from landowners and the church had turned them into respectable, well-ordered events. Mr. Mudge has guided them all year through their farming exploits.
So, put those on there.
Alex has threshed some of their oats to remove the grain, so Mr. Mudge can examine them.
If you can blow them out of your hand, it won't be a good sample, but you can't blow them out of your hand, I don't think. It's a good sample of oat. We've done very well, right, you know?
Steve,
Have
you got a glass of cider for Mr. Mudge, please?
So, Francis, get you to test our cider, and that'll be the acid test of whether we're proper southwest farmers, I think.
There you go, sir.
I'm leaving the cider to the men.
I think it's a big thank you and cheers.
You've done a very good job. Cheers.
Cheers.
Good job, sir. Good cider makers and good farmers all the way round, look like it to me. You've done a very good job.
By the end of the Edwardian age, reliable petrol-powered machines were appearing on farms. Engineers transported their latest models around agricultural shows to encourage farmers to invest. Having experienced firsthand the advantage of harvesting by machine, Alex is demonstrating the very latest in farming motive power.
Gentlemen, please gather round to marvel at some of the innovations of the age. You at the back, sir, come.
The Victorian age had introduced steam power. Now the Edwardian age introduced petrol power.
First and foremost, we have the agricultural motor. A quarter of the size of a steam engine with twice the power.
It was the dawn of a new industrial age of farming that would flourish throughout the 20th century. Engineer Fred Lister is demonstrating how quickly they could thresh oats to remove the grain from the crop.
We are now in the 20th century. We have moved on. Where we used to use a flail or a drashle, we now have a machine to do this for us. You would require 4 or 5 men working all day to produce what that produces in about 2 hours.
If you'd please step back, because we have one of the newest and most innovative machines ever to enter into British agriculture.
Fred's father produced one of the most celebrated agricultural machines of the age, the Lister static engine.
This engine performs the work of at least 5 horses.
You see how a small tank of this new fuel petrol can help us to innovate on the farm. No bales of hay are needed to feed an army of horses. Mr. Lister, can you see a time when there will no longer be horses on the farm?
Yes, I'm afraid I can. The horse is going to be a thing of the past working on a farm.
You have seen the beginnings of a new mechanised age in agriculture. The internal combustion engine has finally arrived at the British farm. Hip hip! Hooray! Thank you very much for coming.
The Edwardian age also saw profound changes in society.
Women of Devon, we are in a crisis. Men are making laws for women in total ignorance of what women themselves actually want.
Suffragettes campaigned for women's votes at events across Britain.
Women beat men for endurance every time. Women of Devon.
But despite an increasingly militant campaign, it wouldn't be until 1928 that women finally got the same voting rights as men.
This moment, help us to win a great victory, and then you will not have lived in vain.
There was an entertainment revolution too. From the deep south of America came a new dance that swept through Britain's music halls. Choreographer Caroline Hines is introducing it to the fete.
This is great. What's it called?
It's called the cakewalk.
Cakewalk.
Yeah, and it was a dance that was done on plantations in the South, in America.
It really sort of seems a bit like a comedy dance. It has that element of parody about it,
Well,
doesn't
it is. In effect, they were mimicking the mannerisms of their white masters, so everything would be exaggerated. So just a simple brush down would become a big brush, and a brush of the legs, everything would be going. The thing about the cakewalk, and the original thing about the cakewalk, was it was competing. So it was one plantation against another plantation, and the prize was a cake.
It quickly took off over here and became one of the most popular dance crazes in Edwardian Britain. Even King Edward VII was rumoured to have had private cakewalk lessons at the palace. It's the final day on the Edwardian Farm. Just one job remains: to store the harvested oats in the barn.
Horses are so versatile, aren't they?
I know. I mean, the tractors in the field are great, aren't they? But once you're on rough ground like this, the horse has still got such a lot of uses.
Exactly. There's no faster way of getting in your last load of oats than just before it starts raining as well.
I know. Look at it, ominous.
Mechanisation of the countryside and the demise of village crafts were hastened by one of the most devastating events of the 20th century. It would bring the golden age of Edwardian Britain to a brutal end: the First World War. It was harvest time in August 1914 when war was declared.
Oh, hello, Alan.
Hiya.
Historian Professor Alan Howkins has studied its impact on the countryside.
Everybody thought it was going to be a short war.
Over by Christmas.
Over by Christmas, yes, everybody said. And so people didn't really think about that, but there was a call for volunteers, and that call, we're told, was met massively. Interestingly, in the country districts, it was a bit different. You're gathering your oats in August 1914. A harvest was the absolutely essential part of the year. To the farmer, it was where he made his money. For the farm worker, it was often taken by the piece. So you earned probably twice as much a week in your harvest as you did at the rest of the year.
Yeah. I mean, there must have been a sense of priorities here.
Yeah,
not everyone could run off to war here.
No, and plenty of farmers didn't want their men to go. They couldn't just let them go, no matter how patriotic or wonderful it was. So the rush to join up was not as obvious, particularly in country districts, as people say it was.
It wasn't only men that were called to war. Horses were too. Michael Morpurgo wrote the novel War Horse, about the experience of a farm horse going to war.
I think right at the beginning of the war, when the army came to the villages all over the country, the farmers often sold them because they were paying good money, and the army really needed horses, that's for sure. But also they would sometimes sequester horses. They would say, well, we're having that horse anyway, whether you like it or not. It was a hard and cruel life for 4 years if they survived. So you needed to pull ambulances, you needed to pull guns, ammunition wagons, because I think they thought mechanised stuff was going to come.
It just didn't come fast enough.
Well,
and besides which, it gets bogged down, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, there are really horrible pictures of both men and horses up to here in mud.
Well, many men and horses
drowned in mud.
Yeah.
It's estimated 500,000 horses died in the Great War. Very few came back.
They suffered exactly as the men suffered. The awful thing was that even if they survived those terrible 4 years, right at the end of the war, when it was all over, they only brought 60,000 horses home. Well, if you reckon that over 1 million went and 60,000 came home, the truth is many, many of them were sold off to butchers in northern France for horse meat.
The horse meat.
After all they'd done.
The Edwardian age would become known as a golden age, perhaps in the light of the horrors that followed it.
I don't believe the First World War left anybody untouched. You know, people like my grandmother, who lost a husband and a brother-in-law, 2 brothers out of 3 killed. To her, the world before the war, when she talked in her old age, was a much, much better place. And yes, you know, you can say, oh, it's golden ageism. Well, in some ways it is, but in some ways it was a golden age because your husband was alive, your brother-in-law was alive. You know, that impact, that personal impact, just to my mind, can never, ever be overestimated. It's an absolutely fundamental fact.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye then. Bye, chaps. It's all history. It's over for the horse. It's a big shame.
Countryside's going to be a noisy place.
Come on then.
Oh well. Onwards and upwards.
After a year at Morwellham Quay, it's time to leave Edwardian Britain for good.
I suppose really it's become understandable for me that in light of what happened in the Great War, that people did look back on that period with maybe rose-tinted spectacles and did think about when sons and fathers were around and happy days spent in sort of endless summers.
I know I am never going to read anything about the Edwardian era in the same light again. It will always come now with this great sort of freight of emotion and experience.
The farm itself is just a series of buildings and land. I mean, that's one thing. But the people who've taken us into their homes and taught us their skills, and it's those relationships we've formed that are going to be the hardest things to leave behind. We're removing ourselves from this community